The night I embarrassed the most powerful woman in Manhattan, I was holding a tray of champagne that cost more than my monthly rent. Rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Valmont Grand Hotel hard enough to sound like applause from God himself. Outside, Manhattan blurred into silver lights and wet asphalt. Inside, everything glittered. Crystal chandeliers. Gold-trimmed ceilings. Women wrapped in diamonds so bright they hurt my eyes every time I looked up too fast. I adjusted the cuff of my black waitress uniform for the third time in 10 minutes and balanced another tray of champagne flutes against my shoulder. My left palm still stung from the burn I got in the kitchen 20 minutes earlier, but pain didn't matter tonight. Nothing mattered except surviving my shift and making enough tips to cover my brother's medication before Friday. "Claire, table 7 needs refills," my manager snapped as he brushed past me without slowing down. "And smile. These people are paying 50 grand a plate." I forced a smile that felt as fake as the eyelashes on half the women in the ballroom and moved through the crowd carefully. The scent of expensive perfume and aged whiskey hung heavy in the air. Somewhere near the stage, a string quartet played soft jazz while politicians and CEOs laughed like the world had never denied them anything. People like me weren't supposed to exist in rooms like this. We served the drinks. Cleared the plates. Stayed invisible. I was halfway across the ballroom when the atmosphere changed. Not slowly. Instantly. Conversations lowered. Heads turned. Even the servers beside me straightened unconsciously. The massive doors near the entrance opened, and Adrian Moretti walked in like the storm outside had personally escorted him there. I recognized him immediately. Everyone in New York did. Dark tailored suit. Broad shoulders. Calm expression that somehow looked colder than anger. He moved through the ballroom surrounded by men in black suits, but none of them drew attention the way he did. Adrian didn't need to raise his voice. Power clung to him naturally. Dangerous men always looked the calmest in the room. My grip tightened. Around the tray. He looked nothing like the stories online. No shouting. No arrogance. Just quiet control. The kind that made people step aside before he even reached them. Then she appeared beside him. Victoria Sinclair. Blonde hair swept into a flawless knot. Red silk dress hugging elegance so expensive it probably had its own security detail. She rested one manicured hand lightly against Adrian's arm while cameras flashed near the entrance. His fiancée. America's favorite billionaire couple. Beautiful. Powerful. Untouchable. I looked away quickly before she caught me staring. Big mistake. You. Her voice cut through the crowd sharply enough to stop me mid-step. I turned. Victoria was looking directly at me now, eyes narrowed slightly. Champagne. Now. I crossed the ballroom carefully and handed her a fresh glass. Thank you, ma'am. She took the flute without acknowledging me, then glanced down at my wrist where the burn mark had turned pink beneath my sleeve. God, she muttered loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. Do they hire anyone now? Heat crawled into my face instantly. A few people nearby laughed quietly into their drinks. I lowered my eyes. Just breathe, Claire. Take the insult. Take the money. Walk away. But then Victoria looked me up and down one more time before smirking. Who do you think you are walking around looking this miserable at my event? Something inside me snapped softly. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough. I lifted my eyes slowly to meet hers. The ballroom suddenly felt too quiet. Probably the same thing you think you are, I said calmly. A person who should learn how to speak to people. Silence. Complete silence. Even the violinist seemed to stop breathing. Victoria's smile disappeared instantly. Around us, guests froze with champagne glasses halfway to their lips. And for the first time that night, Adrian Moretti looked directly at me. Nobody moved. That was the strangest part. In a ballroom filled with senators, billionaires, and women wearing necklaces worth more than brownstone apartments in Brooklyn, every single person suddenly forgot how to breathe. Victoria Sinclair stared at me like I had slapped her across the face instead of answering her question. The crystal champagne flute hung frozen between her fingers while the diamond on her engagement ring caught the chandelier light in sharp white flashes. I should have apologized. Any smart waitress would have apologized immediately. But exhaustion has a dangerous way of burning fear out of people. And I was exhausted all the way down to my bones. Adrian Moretti still had not looked away from me. Those gray-blue eyes stayed fixed on my face with an intensity that made the room feel smaller. Not angry. Not amused. Curious. Somehow that felt worse. Victoria recovered first. Women like her always did. Her lips curved slowly into a smile that looked polished enough for magazine covers but cold enough to freeze water. Interesting, she said softly. Apparently the help has opinions now. A few nervous laughs scattered through the guests nearby. I felt heat climb into my neck again, but I kept my shoulders straight. Claire. My manager's voice appeared behind me in a horrified whisper. Kitchen. Now. I turned immediately, relief flooding through me so fast my knees almost weakened. Good. Escape. Before I could take 2 steps, Adrian finally spoke. She stays. His voice was calm. Deep. Controlled. But every conversation in the ballroom stopped again anyway. My manager froze beside me so quickly he nearly bumped into the tray in my hands. Victoria blinked once before turning toward her fiancé. Excuse me. Adrian reached for a champagne flute from my tray without breaking eye contact with her. You embarrassed a staff member in front of 400 guests, he said evenly. I would rather keep the waitress than the scene. A dangerous silence settled between them. Victoria laughed softly, but there was tension underneath it now. Tiny cracks beneath perfect marble. You are joking. Adrian took a slow sip of champagne. Do I look like I am joking? I should not have still been standing there. Every instinct screamed at me to disappear before rich people started using me as ammunition in whatever terrifying relationship war they had going on. But my feet refused to cooperate. Victoria's eyes slid toward me again. Colder this time. Do not mistake temporary attention for importance. Her words were smooth enough to sound harmless to anyone overhearing. But I heard the blade hidden underneath them. I lowered my eyes carefully. I never asked for attention, ma'am. Adrian's gaze shifted toward me then. And yet you handled it better than most people in this room would have. The compliment hit harder than it should have. Maybe because nobody in rooms like this ever defended girls like me. My manager cleared his throat nervously. Mr. Moretti, perhaps we should move everyone toward dinner service. Adrian nodded once. Businesslike. Emotion gone from his face again as quickly as it appeared. Of course. The spell broke instantly. Conversations restarted. Music returned. The ballroom inhaled again like nothing had happened. Wealthy people were talented at pretending discomfort did not exist. Victoria stepped closer to Adrian and adjusted his tie with elegant fingers, but I noticed the tightness in her jaw now. The cameras near the entrance flashed again as reporters tried capturing the perfect image of Manhattan royalty. Adrian allowed it for exactly 3 seconds before his eyes drifted back toward me one final time. Not to my uniform. Not to my face. To my burned hand still gripping the silver tray too tightly. Something unreadable flickered across his expression. Then he walked away with Victoria on his arm while half the room moved aside for him like the tide pulling back from shore. I finally exhaled. Claire, my manager hissed under his breath the second they disappeared into the crowd. Do you have any idea what you just did? I looked down at the trembling champagne bubbles inside the crystal glasses. Honestly? I whispered. Not even a little. The next 2 hours passed like a slow panic attack wrapped in crystal and gold. I kept my head down, carried trays through crowds of wealthy strangers, and avoided looking toward the VIP section no matter how much I felt Adrian Moretti's attention drifting across the ballroom like heat from an open fire. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe exhaustion was making me paranoid. But every time I entered the room with fresh drinks, I felt aware of him before I actually saw him. My manager certainly noticed. Do not speak unless spoken to, he whispered sharply while adjusting silverware near the dining tables. And for the love of God, stop attracting attention. I am literally carrying shrimp on a tray, I muttered quietly. I am not exactly storming the Capitol. His horrified expression almost made me laugh for the first time all night. Claire. Sorry. But underneath the humor, anxiety sat heavy in my stomach. I knew women like Victoria Sinclair. Not personally. Girls from my neighborhood did not grow up attending private schools with last names stitched into library buildings. But I had served enough rich people to recognize the type. Women who smiled politely while destroying someone's life behind closed doors. Around 10:30, dinner service finally ended. My feet ached so badly I could feel my pulse in my heels. I slipped through the kitchen doors carrying empty champagne bottles and leaned against the stainless steel prep counter for exactly 5 seconds before someone spoke behind me. You do not seem impressed by him. I turned too fast. Victoria stood near the doorway alone now, her red dress catching the harsh kitchen light like fresh paint. Up close, she looked even more beautiful. The kind of beauty that had probably opened doors her entire life. Ma'am. She folded her arms carefully. Most women spend entire evenings trying to get Adrian's attention. Her eyes drifted over my plain uniform slowly. You did it accidentally in under 5 minutes. My throat tightened instantly. That was not my intention. No. She stepped closer, heels clicking softly against the tile floor. Then what exactly was your intention when you embarrassed me in front of half of Manhattan? I opened my mouth. Closed it again. Because there was no correct answer here. The industrial dishwasher hummed loudly somewhere behind me while cooks pretended not to listen. Victoria smiled again, but this one looked sharper. Girls like you always mistake male attention for opportunity. The words landed softly. Almost casually. Somehow that made them sting worse. I felt heat rise into my face again, but I forced myself not to look away. Girls like me? I asked quietly. Working class, she clarified. Pretty enough to believe you can climb higher than your station. There it was. The thing underneath all of it. Not anger. Fear. Tiny. Ugly. Hidden beneath diamonds and perfect posture. And suddenly I understood something dangerous. Victoria Sinclair was not upset because I embarrassed her. She was upset because Adrian noticed me afterward. I should have stayed quiet. I knew that. But my entire life had been spent swallowing humiliation just to survive another week. Another shift. Another overdue bill. Another doctor appointment for my brother that insurance refused to cover. Tonight something inside me had finally gotten tired of choking on silence. I am not trying to climb anywhere, I said carefully. Then learn the difference between confidence and disrespect. Her voice sharpened slightly. Women in your position should be grateful to even stand in rooms like this. I stared at her for one long second. Rain rattled softly against the distant windows beyond the ballroom. Somewhere outside, thunder rolled across Manhattan. And women in your position, I replied quietly, should not need to remind everyone how important they are. The silence afterward felt enormous. Victoria's expression hardened instantly. For the first time all night, her composure cracked completely. You arrogant little, Victoria. Adrian's voice filled the kitchen doorway calmly. Every cook froze. Every sound seemed to disappear at once. I looked up slowly and found him standing there watching both of us with unreadable eyes. His suit jacket hung open now, dark tie loosened slightly at the collar like the night itself had finally started weighing on him too. Victoria stepped back immediately, her expression smoothing over with practiced elegance. But Adrian did not look at her. He looked at me. Directly. Intensely. Like he was trying to understand something nobody had ever denied him before. Adrian Moretti had the kind of presence that changed the temperature of a room without touching the thermostat. 1 second the kitchen felt hot and crowded with steam and clattering dishes. The next, everything turned still. Even the cooks suddenly became fascinated with chopping vegetables they had already chopped 5 minutes earlier. Victoria recovered first, of course. Women raised around cameras and charity galas learned how to rearrange their emotions faster than makeup artists fixed lipstick. "There you are," she said smoothly, crossing toward Adrian with effortless elegance. "I was looking for you." Adrian barely glanced at her. I heard raised voices. His attention returned to me again, calm but focused enough to make my heartbeat stumble awkwardly against my ribs. "Is there a problem?" Every survival instinct I had screamed at me to say no immediately. Rich people protected each other. Men like Adrian Moretti definitely protected the women wearing their engagement rings. But before I could speak, Victoria answered for me. "Nothing serious," she said lightly. "Your waitress simply forgot her place for a moment." The words landed carefully. Polished. Cruel in the way only expensive people manage to be. Adrian slipped one hand into his pocket slowly. "Did she?" Victoria smiled. "You know how staff can become overly familiar when boundaries are unclear." I stared at the stainless steel counter beside me because looking directly at either of them suddenly felt dangerous. The kitchen lights reflected softly against the polished floor while rain continued tapping against distant windows somewhere beyond the ballroom. Adrian stayed quiet long enough to make the silence uncomfortable. Then he asked the question I least expected. "Did you insult her first?" Victoria blinked once. "Excuse me?" It was a simple question. His voice remained perfectly calm. Somehow that made it more intimidating. Victoria laughed softly, but tension sharpened around the edges now. "You cannot possibly be serious right now." Adrian still had not looked away from me. "Claire." Hearing my name in his voice did something strange to my stomach. Deep. Controlled. Like he tasted every word before speaking it aloud. "Answer the question." I swallowed carefully. "It is fine, sir." That was not my question. My pulse started climbing again. Nobody had looked at me like this in years. Like my words actually mattered. Dangerous men did not scare me nearly as much as kind ones. Kindness always cost something eventually. Victoria crossed her arms tightly. "This is ridiculous." Adrian ignored her completely. "Claire." I forced myself to meet his eyes finally. Huge mistake. Up close, they looked less cold than before. Storm-colored instead of icy. Sharp enough to notice everything. She was upset, I admitted quietly. And I answered back. One side of his mouth almost moved. Not quite a smile. Something smaller. More dangerous. Honestly. Victoria stared at him in disbelief. "You admire this?" "I admire honesty." Adrian's tone stayed level. "It is rare in this city." The kitchen suddenly felt too small for breathing. Victoria stepped closer to him, lowering her voice. "You are embarrassing me." Adrian finally looked at her then. "No, Victoria." His expression remained unreadable. "You handled that part yourself." Silence exploded through the room. One of the line cooks nearly dropped an entire tray of dessert plates. Victoria's face drained of color for exactly 1 second before pride covered it again. "I think we should leave," she said tightly. Adrian adjusted the cuff of his black suit with slow precision. "The auction starts in 20 minutes. Then perhaps your waitress should serve it instead, since she apparently has your full attention tonight." The words came out sharper than she intended. Adrian's gaze drifted toward me once more. I suddenly became painfully aware of my burned hand, my cheap non-slip shoes, the faint smell of kitchen smoke trapped in my uniform. He studied me for one long moment before speaking again. "Claire will be assisting in the VIP section for the rest of the evening." My manager nearly choked behind me. Victoria stared at him. "Absolutely not." Adrian's expression never changed. "That was not a request." The room went completely silent again. And for the first time all night, I realized something terrifying. Adrian Moretti was not keeping me nearby to punish me. He was keeping me nearby because he wanted to watch me longer. By 11:15, I understood something important about powerful men. They did not need to threaten people to control a room. Sometimes all they had to do was pay attention to someone unexpected. Every person in the VIP section kept looking at me now. Not openly. Wealthy people were too polished for that. But I noticed the glances every time I poured wine or replaced silverware. Curious looks. Judgmental ones. A few women scanned my plain black uniform like they were trying to figure out what kind of game I was playing. The answer was simple. I was trying to survive my shift without crying in the employee bathroom. Adrian sat near the center of the private dining area beside city officials, investors, and men whose watches probably cost more than my entire apartment building. Victoria remained beside him, elegant and silent now, though tension still sharpened every movement she made. I could feel her dislike from across the room like static before lightning. "Table 12 needs another bottle," my manager whispered while shoving an expensive bottle of Cabernet into my hands. His forehead glistened with stress. "And Claire?" "Yeah. Please stop becoming the main event." I almost laughed. Instead, I carried the wine toward the VIP section carefully. My burned palm throbbed again as I uncorked the bottle beside Adrian's table. The scent of dark fruit and oak drifted upward immediately. I focused on the glasses. Pour. Breathe. Leave. Simple. Your hand. Adrian's voice stopped me halfway through pouring Victoria's glass. I froze. "Sir." His eyes rested on the red mark near my wrist. "That burn should be treated properly." Heat crawled into my face instantly because suddenly every person at the table was looking at my hand too. "It is fine." "No," he said calmly. "It is not." Victoria lifted her wineglass slowly. "I am sure the hotel employs dozens of injured waitresses every week. Perhaps we should not shut down dinner service over one kitchen accident." Adrian never looked away from me. And yet somehow basic concern still feels appropriate. One of the older businessmen coughed awkwardly into his napkin. Another suddenly became very interested in his steak. Rich people could smell relationship problems the same way sharks smelled blood. I lowered my eyes quickly. "Thank you, sir, but I have had worse." The second the words left my mouth, I regretted them. Adrian's expression shifted slightly. Tiny. Barely visible. But something sharper appeared underneath his calm. "Worse?" "I meant working in restaurants," I said quickly. "Burns happen." Victoria leaned back in her chair, studying me carefully now. "You always speak this much to your employers?" "Only the memorable ones." Silence. Complete silence. One man at the far end of the table nearly choked on his drink trying not to react. I should have stopped talking 3 disasters ago. Adrian stared at me for one long second before something unexpected happened. He laughed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just one quiet breath of amusement under his voice. But the effect on the table was immediate. Every person there looked shocked. Because apparently men like Adrian Moretti did not laugh often. Victoria certainly looked stunned. "You are encouraging this?" she asked carefully. Adrian swirled the wine in his glass lazily. "I appreciate people who are honest without rehearsing every sentence first. Most people call that impulsive. Most people are boring." The tension between them thickened instantly. I took one careful step backward, desperate to escape before either of them remembered I was still standing there. Then Adrian spoke again. "Sit down for a minute." My heart nearly stopped. "Excuse me." He gestured toward the empty chair near the edge of the table. "You look exhausted." Every survival instinct I had screamed no immediately. Waitresses did not sit with billionaires. Girls from Brooklyn did not belong beside men whose names appeared on skyscrapers and news channels. Victoria's eyes turned absolutely glacial. "Adrian. It is one chair," he said calmly. "Not a marriage proposal." A few nervous laughs moved around the table again. My pulse hammered so loudly I could barely hear anything else. "I should get back to work," I managed quietly. Adrian studied me for another long moment before nodding once. "You are afraid of this room." The observation landed softly. Too softly. Because he was right. I swallowed carefully and tightened my grip. "On the wine bottle." "No," I whispered honestly. "I am afraid of forgetting I do not belong in it." And for the first time all night, Adrian Moretti looked at me like those words meant something to him personally. The auction ended just after midnight, but the tension inside the ballroom still clung to the air thicker than cigarette smoke. Wealthy people smiled for cameras and shook hands beside million-dollar donations while servers like me moved silently between them collecting empty glasses and folded napkins stained with lipstick and expensive wine. My feet felt numb now. The kind of exhaustion that settled deep behind your eyes and made every sound seem distant. I was stacking dessert plates onto a silver cart near the service hallway when someone stepped beside me quietly. "You should leave before Victoria finds another reason to start a war." I looked up too fast. Adrian stood there alone now without his usual crowd of suited men surrounding him. Somehow that felt more dangerous. Up close, the sharp scent of cedarwood and rain clung faintly to his suit jacket. He loosened his tie another inch while watching me carefully, like he still had not figured me out yet. "I thought people like her did not fight their own battles," I said before I could stop myself. One corner of his mouth moved slightly again. "Usually they pay publicists to do it for them." I laughed quietly before I could help it. The sound surprised both of us. Because the truth was, I had not laughed much lately. Not between double shifts, overdue bills, and trying to hold my tiny family together with grocery store coupons and caffeine. Adrian noticed the change in my expression immediately. Men like him probably noticed everything. "There it is," he said softly. "You look different when you forget to defend yourself." My chest tightened unexpectedly. Dangerous territory. I grabbed another stack of plates quickly to avoid looking directly at him. "I am working, sir." "Adrian. That seems inappropriate." "Why?" His voice stayed calm. "Because I own buildings and you carry trays." I set the plates down harder than necessary. "Because people like me do not casually use first names with men like you." Silence stretched between us for a moment while distant jazz music drifted through the ballroom. Adrian studied me with the same unnerving focus he had used all night. Not flirtation exactly. Something quieter. More curious. "People like you," he repeated carefully. "You say that often." "Because it is true." "No," he said softly. "It is practiced." The words landed harder than they should have. I finally looked at him fully then. His expression had changed again. Less amused now. More observant. Like he could see every crack I spent years trying to plaster over. You carry yourself like someone expecting humiliation before it happens, he continued quietly. That usually means life trained you to expect it. My throat tightened instantly. I hated how close he suddenly sounded to the truth. You analyze waitresses often? I asked lightly. Only the ones who insult billionaires without blinking. I rolled my eyes before I could stop myself. You really enjoyed that? Immensely. The honesty in his voice almost made me smile again. Almost. Then my phone vibrated inside my apron pocket. My stomach dropped immediately. Only one person texted this late at night. I pulled the phone out quickly. Ethan. 3 missed calls. 1 voicemail. Panic hit me so fast my fingers went cold. Adrian noticed instantly. What happened? Nothing. Lie. Terrible lie. I was already dialing my brother back with shaking hands. Ethan answered immediately, coughing hard enough that fear shot straight through my chest. Claire. His voice sounded weak. Too weak. Hey, buddy. What is wrong? I did not want to bother you, but I think the pharmacy gave me the wrong inhaler again. My eyes closed briefly. Of course they did. Because apparently life enjoyed testing how many disasters one person could juggle before collapsing. Did you use it? Yeah. It made my chest feel weird. I grabbed the edge of the silver cart tightly. Okay. Listen to me carefully. I need you to sit down and breathe slowly until I get home. Adrian stayed completely silent beside me now, but I could feel his attention sharpen instantly. Ethan coughed again. You sound tired. I am fine. You always say that when you are not. The ache behind my ribs deepened unexpectedly. Because he was right too. I will be home soon, I whispered. Promise. When the call ended, I realized Adrian was still watching me. Quiet. Focused. Dangerous in that calm way powerful men often were. Your brother? He asked softly. I nodded once while slipping the phone back into my apron. Asthma. Adrian's gaze drifted briefly toward the ballroom filled with champagne towers and glittering diamonds before returning to me again. And you are here serving people who spend $50,000 on dinner while worrying about medication costs. The observation carried no judgment. Somehow that made it worse. I swallowed carefully. That is usually how New York works. Adrian stared at me for one long second before speaking again. No, he said quietly. That is how unfair people make it work. I left the hotel at 12:43 in the morning carrying a headache, aching feet, and $320 in tips folded carefully inside my apron pocket. Rain still soaked Manhattan in silver streaks, turning the sidewalks glossy beneath the city lights. Black cars lined the curb outside the Walmart while reporters and photographers lingered beneath umbrellas hoping for one last celebrity scandal before going home. I kept my head down and moved fast. Girls like me were invisible again once the rich people stopped looking directly at us. Honestly, I preferred it that way. The subway ride to Brooklyn smelled like wet coats, old coffee, and exhaustion. A man slept across from me with a Yankees cap pulled over his eyes while a teenage couple argued quietly near the train doors. Normal people. Tired people. My people. By the time I climbed the narrow stairs to our apartment building, my entire body felt heavy. The hallway lights flickered again because our landlord never fixed anything unless tenants threatened legal action. Apartment 4B waited at the end of the hall with peeling paint and a broken mailbox hanging crooked beside the door. Home. I unlocked the door quickly. Ethan. Kitchen. Relief hit me immediately hearing his voice stronger now. I found my 17-year-old brother sitting at the tiny kitchen table wrapped in an old gray hoodie, homework scattered beside an inhaler and half-finished cup of instant noodles. His blonde hair stuck up in every direction like he had been running nervous hands through it for an hour. "You scared me," I admitted softly while setting my bag down. "Sorry." He looked guilty instantly. I think I panicked more than anything. I crossed the kitchen and pressed the back of my hand lightly against his forehead out of habit. "No fever. Thank God. Are you breathing okay now?" "Better." His eyes narrowed slightly while studying my face. "You look awful." "Thank you. I mean emotionally." I laughed quietly despite myself and collapsed into the chair across from him. The apartment radiator clanged loudly beside us while rain tapped against the fire escape outside the kitchen window. Tiny apartment. Cracked linoleum floor. Cheap noodles. But somehow this room always felt warmer than all the chandeliers at the Valmont combined. Ethan pointed at me with his fork suspiciously. "Something happened tonight." "Many things happened tonight." "Claire." I rubbed both hands over my tired face slowly. "I accidentally insulted a billionaire in front of Manhattan society." Silence. Then Ethan blinked once. "You what?" "Technically his fiancée first." His jaw dropped open completely now. "Are you trying to get murdered?" "That feels dramatic." "Claire. Nobody got murdered." "Comforting." I laughed again before I could stop it. The sound felt strange after tonight. Too light for everything sitting inside my chest. Ethan leaned back in his chair watching me carefully now. "You like him?" I nearly choked on air. "Absolutely not." "You are smiling." "I am exhausted." "Same face." I pointed at him warningly. He is a terrifying man surrounded by bodyguards and expensive lawyers. Still smiling. I groaned softly and dropped my forehead against the table for 1 second. Because the worst part was not that Adrian Moretti intimidated me. The worst part was that underneath all that power and money and dangerous silence, he had looked at me tonight like I was an actual person. Not staff. Not background decoration. Me. And pathetic as it sounded, I could not remember the last time someone looked at me that way. Ethan's expression softened slightly. "Hey." I lifted my head again. "What?" "You deserve nice things too sometimes." The words hit unexpectedly hard. Maybe because nobody had ever said them to me before. I swallowed carefully and reached for his inhaler beside the table instead. "Did you call the pharmacy about this?" "I was waiting for you." "Of course you were." He grinned slightly. "You are scary on the phone." "That is because capitalism fears me." Ethan laughed hard enough to start coughing again. I immediately reached for the glass of water beside him while he waved me off reassuringly. "I am okay," he promised once his breathing settled. "Seriously?" I nodded slowly, but fear still lingered beneath my ribs because life had taught me one cruel lesson early. The moment you loved something deeply, you started worrying about losing it constantly. My phone buzzed suddenly against the kitchen table. Unknown number. I frowned immediately. Nobody important ever called me after 1 in the morning. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Answer it." "Probably spam." The phone buzzed again. Same number. Slowly, I picked it up and pressed it to my ear. "Hello." Silence for half a second. Then Adrian Moretti's calm voice filled the line quietly enough to stop my heart completely. "Did you make it home safely, Claire?" For one terrifying second, I genuinely thought my exhausted brain had invented his voice. I sat frozen at our tiny kitchen table staring at the cracked cabinet above the sink while rain continued tapping softly against the fire escape outside. Ethan's eyes widened across from me immediately. He could tell from my face this was not spam anymore. "Hello?" Adrian repeated calmly. "Claire." I cleared my throat too quickly. "How did you get this number?" Smooth. Brilliant response. Somewhere across Manhattan, I imagined one of the most powerful men in New York blinking slowly at his phone, wondering how he became emotionally invested in a waitress with survival instincts shaped entirely by sarcasm and unpaid bills. "Your employee file," he answered simply. "Of course. Right. Billionaires did not exactly struggle with access to information." "That sounds slightly illegal," I muttered. Ethan covered his mouth instantly, trying not to laugh. Adrian's voice shifted subtly. Warmer somehow. "You made it home safely then?" The concern in his tone caught me off guard again. Not performative concern either. Real. Quiet. Dangerous. "Yes," I answered carefully. "My brother is okay too." Silence drifted briefly between us before he spoke again. "Asthma?" "Since he was 6. I twisted the phone cord around my finger automatically before remembering phones had not used cords in years. Great. I was apparently regressing psychologically in real time. Adrian stayed quiet long enough that I could hear faint city noise in the background on his end. A car door closing somewhere. Distant traffic. "You take care of him alone," he said eventually. It was not a question. "Most of the time." "Parents?" My chest tightened slightly. "Gone." Another silence. Softer this time. Not awkward. Heavy. Like he understood loss better than he admitted publicly. Ethan watched me across the table with an expression that screamed gossip later. I ignored him completely. "You should sleep," Adrian said finally. "You look exhausted." I blinked once. "You can see me through the phone now?" "I noticed before you left." The honesty in his voice unsettled me more than flirting would have. Because men like Adrian Moretti probably lied beautifully when necessary. But tonight he kept choosing honesty instead. "Why are you calling me?" I asked quietly before I could lose courage. No hesitation this time. "Because I have not stopped thinking about you since you looked at a room full of wealthy people and refused to become smaller for them." My heart betrayed me immediately. One hard painful beat against my ribs. Ethan nearly fell out of his chair watching my face. I stood up quickly and moved toward the tiny living room before he could hear more. "That sounds like a very expensive personality flaw," I whispered. Adrian laughed softly under his breath. God. Even his laugh sounded controlled. "Do you always hide behind humor when something makes you uncomfortable? Do you always psychoanalyze waitresses? After midnight?" "Only the memorable ones." I sank slowly onto our old couch while city lights glowed faintly through the rain-streaked window beside me. My apartment suddenly felt painfully small compared to the world he belonged to. Second-hand furniture. Peeling paint near the ceiling. Medical bills stacked beside the television. "You should not be calling me," I admitted quietly. "Why?" "Because tomorrow morning you are still going to be Adrian Moretti. And tomorrow morning I am still going to wake up worrying about pharmacy coupons." The silence afterward hurt more than I expected. Not because he pitied me. Somehow I knew he never would. But because for the first time in years, I hated how visible my struggles suddenly felt. Adrian spoke carefully when he answered. "Claire." My name sounded different in his voice now. Lower. More personal. "There is nothing shameful about surviving difficult things." I closed my eyes briefly. Nobody had ever said that to me before either. "You barely know me." "I know enough." "That is impossible." "No," he said softly. "What is impossible is pretending you are ordinary after tonight." My pulse stumbled again. Dangerous conversation. Dangerous man. Somewhere down the hallway, Ethan turned the television on loudly to give me privacy he absolutely did not emotionally possess. I stared out at the rain sliding down the apartment window while exhaustion settled deeper into my bones. "This is a bad idea," I whispered honestly. Adrian did not argue. Probably. Your fiancé already hates me. Victoria hates anyone she cannot control. The words came out calm. Final. Like a truth he accepted years ago. I swallowed carefully. You should go back to your world, Adrian. Silence. Then his voice lowered slightly. What if I am tired of that world tonight? Before I could answer, another voice cut sharply through the background on his end. Female. Cold. Familiar. Who are you talking to? Victoria. My stomach dropped instantly. Adrian stayed quiet for one dangerous second too long. Then the line disconnected. I did not sleep that night. Not really. I lay awake on our ancient couch staring at the cracked water stain on the ceiling while rain continued falling over Brooklyn until sunrise painted the windows gray. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Adrian's voice again. What if I am tired of that world tonight? Dangerous sentence. Dangerous man. And somehow the worst part was that I believed him. Ethan left for school around 7:30 after forcing me to drink burnt coffee and promising for the 5th time that he could survive one day without me checking his inhaler every 10 minutes. I barely listened. My brain still felt trapped somewhere between Manhattan chandeliers and the sound of Victoria Sinclair asking who Adrian was talking to. By 8:15, my phone started exploding. Text messages. Calls. Notifications. At first I thought something happened to Ethan at school. Panic hit so hard I nearly dropped my coffee mug trying to unlock my screen. Then I saw the headlines. Mystery waitress captures Adrian Moretti's attention at charity gala. Who is the woman seen arguing with Victoria Sinclair? Social media explodes over viral gala moment. My blood turned completely cold. Someone had recorded us. Of course they had. Wealthy people treated privacy like an optional accessory until scandal became profitable. I opened the first video with shaking fingers. There I was standing beside Victoria in my cheap black uniform while crystal chandeliers glittered overhead. The audio crackled slightly, but my voice still came through clearly. And women in your position should not need to remind everyone how important they are. Jesus Christ. 3 million views overnight. Thousands of comments flooded the screen beneath the clip. Some called me brave. Others called me an attention-seeking waitress trying to trap a billionaire. One account posted side-by-side screenshots of me and Victoria with the caption, "Old money versus audacity." I felt sick instantly. Claire. My manager's voice exploded through my phone before I could even say hello. Please tell me you did not intentionally become internet famous. I pressed my fingers against my forehead. I would rather become legally dead. The hotel has reporters outside. Wonderful. And Victoria Sinclair's assistant called. Demanding your full employment file. Ice slid down my spine immediately. Did you give it to her? Absolutely not. I enjoy remaining alive. Fair point. I sank slowly onto the couch while Manhattan gossip blogs continued refreshing across my screen like tiny digital explosions ruining my life in real time. Am I fired? Silence. Then a sigh. Honestly? I do not know yet. Great. Fantastic. My phone buzzed again before he could continue. Unknown number. I already knew who it was. Somehow that felt even more terrifying now. I have to go, I whispered. Claire. My manager hesitated. Whatever this is with Moretti, there is no this. The call ended. I stared at Adrian's number for 3 long seconds before answering carefully. Hello. You should not read the comments. No greeting. No hesitation. Just that calm voice wrapping around my panic like smoke. I laughed once in disbelief. Little late for that advice. People online become cruel when they are bored. And rich people become cruel when they are threatened. Silence. Then quietly, Victoria contacted you? Not yet. She will. I closed my eyes briefly. This is exactly why I told you to stay in your world. Adrian's voice lowered slightly. Claire. No, seriously. Look at this mess. I stood and started pacing our tiny living room while sunlight crept weakly through the rain clouds outside. I have rent due next week and now half the internet thinks I am trying to seduce Manhattan royalty with a catering tray. To my surprise, Adrian laughed softly under his breath again. That might be the most Brooklyn sentence I have ever heard. I stopped pacing immediately because somehow he kept making me forget I was supposed to be angry with him. This is not funny. No, he admitted quietly. It is not. The honesty in his voice settled the panic inside my chest more than it should have. Dangerous again. Everything about him felt dangerous now. Claire, he said carefully. I need you to understand something before this becomes uglier. My stomach tightened instantly. That does not sound reassuring. Victoria is not upset because of a waitress. His tone stayed calm. Controlled. But underneath it, I heard something heavier. Something final. She is upset because for the first time in years, I defended someone instead of defending her. Silence swallowed the room completely. Outside, Brooklyn traffic moved through wet streets while distant sirens echoed faintly somewhere beyond the apartment windows. I swallowed carefully. Adrian, and I think both of us know why. My pulse stumbled hard against my ribs. Because deep down, terrifyingly, I did know why too.